All right, so we are going to be breaking this new unit into a few sections. The first one is microbiology, and this is your first video. So we're going to talk a little bit about what microbiology is, and then talk a lot more about what viruses are. And helping me today is Mr. Klein, who you might not know.
Hello.
Unless you're a girls cross-country runner. He is a physics teacher at Almond. We went to college together.
U of I.
Yep. So here we go. So microbiology is the study of microorganisms. Because what does micro mean?
Small.
Small. Very good. You must have a science degree or something.
Yeah, or times 10 to the negative 6 micro.
He knows his metric because he teaches physics.
Yeah,
But anyway.
I have no choice.
So we usually group a few things into microbiology. So bacteria, and that includes archaebacteria, protists, fungi, viruses, prions, and viroids. Now I have a star next to viruses, prions, and viroids because they're not technically considered living things.
Okay.
And we'll explain a little bit about why that is when we go along.
So when they say I kill the virus, is that doesn't really make sense because they're not technically alive?
Yeah, so I guess that would be an impossible statement.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're not really alive. And there's a bit of debate, I guess. Not really, but they're treated like living things sometimes in terms of how we classify them. So it's kind of an interesting thing to look at. But
They just don't perfectly fit the definition.
yeah. And actually, they don't fit the majority of the definition of life, actually. That's like the next slide.
Okay.
But anyway, so microbiology is really important because, and this is one of my goals in this unit, is to kind of show you microorganisms, despite how incredibly small they are, they really, really impact human life, both in positive and negative ways. So I actually took a picture of some bacteria that typically lives in your intestines, that is helpful bacteria for that. And we're going to talk a lot more about those. But now, why aren't viruses alive? So if you think way back to the first day of school, I talked about what are characteristics of living things. So living things need to grow and develop. Viruses do not grow and develop. They actually are always the same size.
Okay.
They do not reproduce on their own. They must actually use a living cell to reproduce. They do not carry out any metabolic activities, which means they don't eat anything.
Okay.
They do not maintain homeostasis. Now, do you happen to know what homeostasis is? This one trips up my students like crazy, what homeostasis is.
You know, I'm not sure, actually. I mean, I would assume it's some type of state that you stay in.
You're right.
But they don't, I guess. They don't maintain. What is it
Right.
exactly?
Homeostasis is the living things, they like to maintain somewhat level conditions.
Okay, so I'm always the same temperature unless
Yeah.
I'm sick.
Try to regulate temperature, even try to regulate the amount of oxygen in your body, things like that. And finally, viruses aren't made of cells.
Okay.
And they're actually a lot smaller than most cells, even bacterial cells. You can see a little picture there to your right about how big they are. So real quick, some components about viruses. All viruses have two things. They have genetic material that can be DNA or RNA, and they can also have a capsid, which is made of protein, and it surrounds that DNA or RNA. Those are the minimum requirements. But do you think they all have the minimum requirements?
Well, I guess not.
Leading question, I
Yeah.
guess. The first thing that they can have is called an envelope, and it's a layer that is outside the capsid that has proteins and even some lipids sometimes that help the virus enter cells. The flu virus has an envelope on the outside of it.
Get your flu shots.
Yes. So then some viruses have what's called a tail and tail fibers, and they can help a virus actually attach to the cell. So that doesn't even look like a virus really, does it?
No.
It looks like a robot.
It looks like something from Star Wars.
Yeah.
Or Transformers.
So, and some people are shocked to find that a lot of, especially viruses that infect bacteria, look like these robot type things. But anyway, so there are a few types of viruses, and you'll realize that the naming for two of them is very, very straightforward.
Okay.
A DNA virus is a virus that injects DNA into a cell.
Okay.
Now,
It's about what it's injecting into
yeah,
the cell.
exactly.
Okay.
Basically, what a virus does, it injects DNA into a cell, and it tricks that cell into making proteins for the virus. So
Okay.
viruses, do you remember what part was made of protein based on what I said before?
No.
The capsid.
Okay.
So the capsid is
That's
the outside.
okay. All right.
Yeah, it surrounds the genetic material.
The capsid was on the outside, and remind me again what's in the middle.
Genetic material.
Oh,
So like DNA or RNA.
All right.
And then, it's okay.
Get it.
You'll get this.
Physics.
Yeah. So anyway, the cell, in order to reproduce, the virus actually tricks the cell into using their like RNA. I'm blanking on stuff now. RNA polymerase, ribosomes, and stuff like that into making proteins that will eventually become the capsid of the virus.
Okay.
So the cell actually makes new viruses inside of it because it's tricked by the virus. In this case, a DNA virus is one that injects DNA into a cell.
All right.
And I believe this is chickenpox. It is an example of a DNA virus.
Okay. Do you know about meningitis by any chance?
I'm not sure. Why do you bring up meningitis?
Because I had meningitis last year, 2 years ago.
Bacterial
actually.
or viral?
It was viral
Yes.
meningitis.
This is actually why I asked you to do this video. It's because you
Okay.
had viral meningitis.
Yeah, no, it was
So I
terrible.
figured you were well qualified.
If you want to know how it affects you, it's pretty brutal. You'll have a lot of pain in your back of your neck, and you cannot touch your chin to your chest. That's how you tell if you have meningitis. You try to touch your chin to your chest, and it hurts so much you can't do it. But even if it didn't hurt, you still wouldn't be able to do it because it's so tight back there. And something else that happened to me was I went cross-eyed. My eyes literally it was cross-eyed. And it was to the point where I lost control over my eye muscles. So I was just stuck being cross-eyed.
So you just pretty much had to lay in bed for...
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
with a terrible headache and unable to see. And my phone ran out of batteries.
Yes,
so
I remember I suddenly stopped hearing from you.
So I thought I was going to die, but they brought me to a hospital. And the good thing for hospitals, they saved me, and I stayed there for a whole week
Yep.
until I got better.
And then you slept for like a week after that.
A week straight. 24 times 7 hours.
Yeah. So here's a question. Now, the last one was a DNA virus. We're going to talk about RNA viruses. What do you think RNA viruses inject into a cell?
RNA.
Yeah, very
which
good.
stands for ribonucleic acid.
Right.
I remember.
Nice. Very
and,
nice.
And DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid.
Right.
All right.
So you remember some of the stuff.
Yep.
Now, rabies is an example of an RNA virus. Now, this one's a little complicated. This is what HIV and AIDS are. It's called a retrovirus.
Okay.
Now, retro means to kind of go back, right?
Yeah.
So the virus injects RNA into the cell, but it also injects an enzyme called reverse transcriptase.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if you remember this. Transcription is when you go from DNA to RNA. So reversing
Vaguely, yes.
transcription
Yeah.
would be going from RNA
Back
to
to
DNA.
Okay.
So it has reverse transcriptase. It makes DNA from that RNA,
Okay.
and then it has lots of copies of DNA to use within the cell it infected to transcribe and translate more virus parts. So, and then finally, this is kind of a separate category, a bacteriophage. A bacteriophage can be a DNA or RNA virus. A bacteriophage, by definition, is just a virus that infects bacteria. And they're extremely common, actually.
Okay. I was about to say that sounds really dangerous because bacteria is already bacteria, and then you infect it with a virus.
Well, actually, I mean, bacteriophages really can't hurt us,
Okay.
believe it or not.
Wait,
They really only infect bacteria.
Oh.
I think that leads to my next slide,
so
actually.
that can be a good thing.
Yeah. Viruses are specific usually. Plant viruses infect plants. Animal viruses only affect certain animals. There are some things that can kind of change species. So you might be familiar with avian bird flu can infect us, or there was swine flu. So there are it's a lot of flu viruses actually can usually infect several different types of animals that are closely related. But anyway, so in bacteriophages really only infect bacteria.